And we continue with a special program covering this special referendum, the consultative referendum in defense of the Essequibo. If you just tune in, we have been talking with different guests in unison with Gladys Quesada and her those who are in Caracas. We're now going back again with Gladys Quesada to continue analyzing the importance of and the repercussions of this referendum.
Thanks, Luis, for the time again, and we retake the dialogue with Diego Sequera. And as we were announcing and presenting him, he is an expert on Venezuelan issues and also an international analyst. We welcome again, Diego.
Thank you. Thank you
So,
one more time.
we left the dialogue regarding one main topic that I think is very discussed also today in Venezuela, because in Venezuela it is running up the forum of the 200 years of the Monroe Doctrine and the Monroe Policy.
Right.
So we were talking about this, and we were also talking about the discovery, to say in a way,
Quote unquote.
of Guyana, yeah, quote unquote, the discovery of Guyana and the origins of this construction of the Essequibo region as a place of wealth and big resources and a land for grab also.
Yes, and that's a very important thing, because I was actually thinking about this because first of all, I just reminded probably a fun fact, but during the while Venezuela was in a major infighting which lasted several decades, in the La Guerra Federal, the Federal War, and all the successive conflicts that were related to land and power back then, that was the moment actually when the Brits were able to explore so easily all these areas, because we were actually dealing with something else, with our own sense of what was going to be finally, who was going to be ruling the government and how it's going to be ruled and whatnot, right? So I was thinking this kind of fun facts. For example, remember that the explorer that the British Crown sent into Guyana, into the Guyana Essequiba, was a guy with the last name Schomburg, which, there's a Venezuelan word for crook, which is choro.
Okay.
Which comes from Schomburg, actually. It was a popularization of the word that actually still remains in Venezuelan vocabulary up to this day. So that kind of, those small details kind of, bring back how alive history is in this quarters. And also I was thinking about another thing. It's funny how for the Brits, it's always a matter of supposedly empty space, uninhabited space, according to them. And you can think about, for example, the case with Palestine. There's no difference. And the Balfour Declaration said there's no one there. Please address the World Zionist Conference, and because we need to populate this. But of course, there was people there.
Yeah.
We're talking about.
There was a culture there.
And it was already there for thousands of years.
Yes.
You have the same approach with the Essequibo in some way or another, with the Essequibano population. They didn't exist in all these exploration, in all these maps. It was the gold, it was all the resources that were important. And that was also the main reason, also the main matter why it was part of the Paris Laudatory Award. I don't know, I still forgot the
arbitrary award.
Yeah, the arbitrary award.
Yes.
I still forget the
exact translation.
Yeah, the exact translation, the legal translation of this,
yes.
And which is very sensitive. But anyway,
you have a very, very interesting topic there. That is the construction, as we were saying in the beginning of our conversation, the construction of maybe a wasteland. A land that is empty, that is abandoned, because that's the main, that's the guideline for them.
Yes, exactly.
That is abandoned, and that doesn't belong to no one, is a no one or no man land.
Correct, yes.
So in that case, they find a way to appropriate. But let's talk about the Monroe Doctrine, because now we are taking this a further step. Okay?
Yes.
Because this is not only the UK, now is the US, and the way they're orchestrated behind the curtains, this appropriation or this, in this case, this disappropriation
Yes.
of the territory from Venezuela and to put that in other hands conveniently. So what about that with the Monroe Doctrine and how that reflects and echoes in today's dispute and in today's challenges?
Sure. Well, it's pretty dramatic. Remember that back in the day, the only one that defended Venezuela, we were talking about that previously, was the U.S., but not defending Venezuela. They were defending their own influence in the region, in the hemisphere. You know, it wasn't. It didn't have anything to do with Venezuela by itself.
And here I go again, defending Cuba before from
Exactly.
the Spanish Empire, and in the end, in the bottom of that intentions of that objective was the appropriation of Cuba.
No, it was basically controlled. Well, in the Cuban situation, it was even more dramatic.
2 years later, also.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. Well, in 1 year before, actually, it's the year where the U.S. empire actually expanded officially.
Yeah.
And you have like three major landmarks there. You have Cuba, you have Philippines, and you have also the 1,000 Days War in Colombia, which actually ended up with the independence, quote unquote, of Panama. So it's a very mobile situation. It's a very dynamic moment. Actually, we're not taught. We weren't taught back in the day about this with this impression of how dynamic actually things were. Not for us, in a way, And also you can't rule out that it's also pretty close to the Berlin Conference, which is basically the starting line, the starting line, yes, for the scramble for Africa. So we're talking about actually that stage of imperialism and colonialism, and different, not only the U.S. but also in Europe and Africa. It's part of the same rationale. Although the Essequibo affair, it's previous to this. So is like Malvinas, and so is like Gibraltar.
But it all belongs to the same pattern of appropriation
and
The
aggression,
same
and expoliation.
path.
Yes,
it's the same path.
Absolutely. So the thing is that afterwards it turned more into it was contained in a way by the U.S. in order to the U.S. to manage it, and in accordance to another series of situations. You also have, for example, in Venezuela, 3 years afterwards, we have in the naval siege of Venezuela by Germans and French and Italian companies that actually moved the military. And what gave the final word on this situation was the U.S. It was the Monroe Doctrine one more time operating in this situation and saying we're not going to accept any European interference. And it had nothing to do with Venezuelan independence. It had to do with the U.S. control of the Caribbean rim in general, the Caribbean basin,
Yeah, because I want to tell this for our non-Spanish audiences and non-Spanish speaking audiences. For us, the Latin American people, for someone that in the U.S., the Monroe Doctrine, it is about America for the people in America, but as the people in the U.S. consider themselves Americans, they think of Latin American territories as their own. So those are the premises.
At least they're under their sphere's influence, Maybe not direct control, occupation like Guantanamo, but yeah, exactly. But that's actually from the same.
Yeah, I know.
Same area, by the way, the same era, the same years. But at least control it, if not directly, by proxy.
Yes.
That's basically it. And you have that situation, and they even relied on the Brits, and you have to still manage the situation. Then we have to fast forward now to. We can fast forward already to the Geneva Agreement in 1966, which was previously to Guyana actually become independent. And I quote unquote this because it's part of the Commonwealth still. So how independent actually Guyana is? It's an uncomfortable question. I'm just going to put here. And
which is the extent of that independence?
Well, precisely how much, and remember that. Well, they had very important politicians. I mean, for example, the first ruler, Che Diego, was a very interesting character, very committed to his own people, not only his own ethnical people, but the whole of the demographics of what Guyana is, and also, the same with most of the English Caribbean. A very strong composition of African descent and Indian also from India. I mean, which is
Yeah.
also very important. Muslim, also an important Muslim component, and a smaller indigenous minority, of course. But the thing is that this was the moment when it was multilaterally acknowledged that this 1899 Paris
Arbitrary agreement.
arbitrary agreement
Award.
Correct, award was
Is even difficult to translate, and it's even difficult to speak
exactly.
about.
It was established, and so this is the moment when I have
to stop you there
Go
because
ahead,
we have
go
to
ahead.
give back the signal. So stopping there,
Please,
we